The first moment I saw her, I knew something in my life was about to shift. I was standing by the barn, running a hand through my hair, pretending I didn't feel the pull in my chest, pretending I wasn't already looking for excuses to stay longer. But then she said it, words that sliced through the quiet morning air. "I don't trust men who hide things." Before she even realized I was standing right behind her, I froze. That wasn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to be here for one thing: work, fix the barn, get the money, and leave. But Carmen Hale was already changing all of that. I hadn't even laid eyes on her until I walked in, and when I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was a storm on the horizon. Something I could see but not touch. Something that might tear apart everything I thought I knew about myself. I snorted, trying to brush off the tension I suddenly felt. "I didn't mean to overhear," I said, stepping into the barn, moving slowly, hoping she wouldn't see right through me. But Carmen just crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. "I doubt that," she replied, her voice laced with something I couldn't place. Suspicion? Defensiveness? Maybe both. It was strange how she looked at me like she was already sizing me up. I wasn't used to being looked at that way. People either ignored me or saw me as a means to an end. Fixing barns, making things right, that's what I did. That's what I was good at. But Carmen? She didn't just see the work I could do, she saw me. All of me. And that wasn't something I was ready to confront. I tilted my head, trying to play it cool. "What exactly don't you trust?" I asked, stepping closer, studying her. She was trying hard not to care, but I could see it in her eyes, an edge of fear hidden behind that tough exterior. "Men who keep their cards too close," she said, shrugging, her brown eyes steady but tired, like she had been through too many games already. "People who walk into a room and look like they've already decided how everyone else fits into their life. Maybe I just assess things fast. Or maybe you're hiding something." I felt something stir inside me, something protective, something I didn't want to feel, not now, not when I was trying to keep things simple. I met her gaze. Or maybe I'm just here to work. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way she held her ground, the way she sized me up with a glance. Carmen wasn't just interested in what I could do with my hands. She wanted to know who I was underneath all that. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to hide. Her voice cut through the silence, sharp and honest. "If you're going to fix this place, don't lie to me about anything. I can't afford another person walking out halfway." That one hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I didn't answer, just nodded, trying to shake the feeling that she had just read my mind. My past. My fears. I walked past her and knelt down to check the support beam, my fingers tracing the grain of the wood, feeling where the damage had taken hold. The barn was in worse shape than I had anticipated. The photos hadn't shown the moisture damage, the crumbling floor, the broken supports. The work would take longer than 2 weeks. It would take more than just me. She stood there, watching me, waiting for an answer I knew. She had that way about her, the way she waited for the truth even when no one was willing to speak it. I didn't want to tell her, but I did anyway. "It can be saved," I said, my voice firm, "but not by someone working alone. Not by someone who doesn't know what they're doing." Her shoulders dropped slightly, the tension in her body easing just a little. "So I hired the right man." I didn't respond right away. "That depends," I said, turning to meet her gaze. "Do you follow instructions?" She blinked, taken aback. "I don't take orders." I smirked. "Then this job will be hell." She laughed, sharp and genuine, the sound of it filling the space between us. There was something about her, something in the way she carried herself, that made me want to stay and see what happened next. By noon, we had found a rhythm. She moved quickly, hauling lumber and clearing debris, while I crawled onto the subfloor to inspect the framing. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. The work was hard, but it was honest. It was real. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself actually enjoying it. Occasionally, I caught her looking at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Not in a flirtatious way, not in a curious way, but in a way that made me feel like she was trying to figure me out. I didn't mind it, though. I didn't mind her eyes on me. When the sun started to lower behind the ridge and the barn turned golden in the light, Carmen spoke again. "You don't smile much," she said, sweeping the corner of the barn with a broom. "I smile enough," I replied, wiping sweat from my brow. She didn't buy it. "Haven't seen it. Maybe you're not that funny." She stared at me for a long moment before she cracked a real smile, warm and full of life. "Your trouble," she said, leaning on the broom. "I've been called worse," I said. And for a moment, just for a moment, it felt like something had shifted. Something real was growing between us. And it wasn't just the barn we were rebuilding. I could feel the weight of it as the day turned to evening, the quiet between us growing thicker. But I didn't say anything. Neither did she. We just worked, just existed in the space we had created together, side by side, the air between us charged with something we both couldn't name. When we finished for the day, we locked up the barn and walked toward our trucks. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and the motion left a streak of dust across her cheek. I couldn't help myself. "You missed a spot," I said. She wiped it away but missed again. I reached out and gently brushed the dust from her cheek with my thumb. The air between us went still. Her breath caught, and for a moment I thought I might say something. Something real. But instead, I just asked, "You really want to know?" Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. Not yet. And then she said it, the words that would change everything between us. "Are you married?" she asked, her voice quieter now, as though she was afraid of what the answer might be. I could have laughed. I could have lied. I could have walked away pretending nothing had changed, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to hide. "No," I said. "I'm still waiting for her." Her eyes softened just a little, but she didn't say anything. The air around us grew thick, heavy with things we weren't ready to say. I turned, walking toward my truck, but I could feel her eyes on me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind it. In fact, I felt something in me pull toward her, something I didn't understand yet. But I was going to find out. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm went off, my mind already on the work that awaited me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just the barn that was pulling me back. It was her. I drove to the barn faster than I had planned, the fog still heavy on the ground, curling around fence posts like it had nowhere to go. But it wasn't the fog that made me rush. It was the thought of her, Carmen, and the strange pull I felt in my chest when I left her the night before. The barn looked different in the early light, quiet, almost expectant, like it knew something I didn't. And when I saw her standing by the truck, her hair pulled back, but strands falling loose around her face, I knew this was more than just a job for me now. She looked up when she heard the truck pull in, her eyes meeting mine with that steady gaze that somehow saw right through me. "Morning," she said, her voice soft but carrying a hint of something unspoken between us. "You're early," I remarked, stepping out of the truck, a little surprised by the weight of her presence. It was as if the air shifted when she was near, the silence between us, charged with something neither of us was ready to name. "Couldn't sleep," she said, brushing her hair out of her face as she turned back to her truck. "Neither could I wanted to say. But I didn't. I just nodded and walked over to the pile of lumber we had set aside for the day's work. The barn was still a mess, but it had a kind of raw beauty to it now. It felt like it was waiting for us, like it was waiting for something to come to life within its walls. I didn't look at her right away, but I could feel her eyes on me, watching me in that quiet, observant way she had. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't like she was trying to figure me out. It was as though she was waiting for something, waiting for me to say something, do something. And I hated that I didn't know what that something was. We worked for hours, side by side, without saying much. She lifted beams, carried tools, cleared debris. Her movements were steady and sure. It was clear to me now that Carmen wasn't someone who stood around, waiting for help. She wasn't someone who let the world pass her by. She took it all on, head first, as if she had no other choice. And that, in a strange way, made her more real than anyone I had ever known. Every now and then, I caught her looking at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Not like she was trying to get my attention, more like she was studying me, watching me, trying to figure out what made me tick. Around noon, she walked over with a sandwich. Nothing fancy, just turkey and cheese. But the way she handed it to me, the way she looked at me when I took it, felt like 1,000 unspoken things. "You didn't take a lunch break," she said, settling down on a nearby overturned bucket. "You didn't either," I said, nodding toward her, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. She didn't smile back, but there was a softness in her eyes, something more than just the physical exhaustion of the day. It was like she was letting herself rest, letting her guard slip just a little bit. "So," I said, taking a bite of the sandwich, trying to break the silence, "how'd you end up with this place?" I didn't know why I asked. Maybe because the question had been lingering on the tip of my tongue for days. Maybe because I was starting to feel like there was something here, something I needed to understand. She looked away, just for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost distant. "It's been in my family for years. My grandfather built the barn." She paused, as if the words were heavier than they seemed. "But after he died, it all started falling apart, and when the bank started breathing down my neck, I knew I had to do something about it." She sounded tired, worn, like the weight of the barn, and everything it represented was crushing her, but she didn't let it show. Carmen Hale wasn't someone who let anything break her. "Is that why you do it yourself?" I asked. "Because no one else can?" She didn't answer at first. She just sat there, looking out at the barn, the storm clouds gathering in the distance. "Maybe," she finally said, "but maybe I don't trust anyone else to do it right." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded, feeling the tension between us build again. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just a weight, a knowing. The sky darkened and the wind picked up, carrying the first hints of rain. "Storm's coming early," she said, standing up. I followed her toward the barn. "Yeah, looks like it," I said. "Think the roof will hold?" Quote, "It'll hold," she said, but there was doubt in her voice and nervousness she couldn't hide. We reinforced the weak points, but with a storm this big. "You didn't do this alone," I said, cutting her off. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. She looked at me, eyes narrowing just a little. "No, I didn't," she said, her voice steady now. "But I've been doing it mostly by myself for so long it's hard to let anyone else in." I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't the kind of thing you could fix with a few words. The storm hit hard that afternoon. The wind howled, rain poured down in sheets, and the temperature dropped. We worked through it, though, climbing ladders, hauling beams, bracing the walls. There was no time to stop. The barn was holding up, but I could tell the storm was getting worse. The sky grew darker, the lightning flashing across the horizon, filling the barn with jagged light. At one point, lightning cracked so close, the sound made the little terrier hiding in the corner jump. Carmen kneeled beside it, calming the dog with soft words. "You talk nicer to him than you do to me," I called from above, trying to keep the tension in my chest from spilling out. She looked up at me, wet hair plastered to her face. "Maybe he listens better." I smirked, even though the storm had my nerves on edge. "I listen fine." "Really?" she asked, looking up at me, her eyes searching. "What did I tell you earlier?" I paused, holding her gaze. "That you're worried, and that you're pretending you're not." She froze for a moment, caught, but then she shook her head. "You're impossible." "Frequently," I said, a real smile spreading across my face this time. It wasn't much, but it was something, and maybe it was enough. By the time the storm started to lose its intensity, we had finished securing the barn. We climbed down slowly, but Carmen stopped on the last rung, her face inches from mine. "You didn't answer me earlier," she whispered. "You didn't tell me what you want." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to pretend. "I want what's real," I said quietly, "and this feels real." Her eyes softened, and she took a small step closer, just enough for me to feel the heat of her body. "It does," she whispered. The air between us thickened again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was full of something else, something neither of us had words for. And then she did something I didn't expect. She reached up and touched my cheek, her fingers trembling slightly. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't hesitate. "I will," I said, and just like that, I knew I wasn't leaving. The rain fell steadily through the night, but I barely noticed it. Carmen and I stayed in the barn, the quiet hum of the storm outside settling into the rhythm of our own breathing. The lantern flickered softly between us, casting shadows on the walls we had worked so hard to rebuild. I could feel the weight of the moment, the space between us thick with something neither of us wanted to ignore any longer. We didn't talk much after I agreed to stay. Maybe there were no words left to say, or maybe we both just needed to let things unfold on their own. I sat close to her, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth of her body, to feel the presence of someone who, for the first time in a long time, didn't make me want to run. "Do you ever feel like life keeps taking things from you?" she asked, her voice soft, hesitant. She wasn't looking at me, just staring into the flickering lantern. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. She had already said everything in that question. She didn't need to hear me say it too. I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Sometimes it feels like the more you give, the more you lose." She shifted, drawing the quilt tighter around her shoulders. "Then you get tired of building again?" "I do," I said, my voice low, almost a whisper, "but I don't stop." She turned to me then, meeting my eyes for the first time in a long while. The intensity in her gaze caught me off guard. There was so much she was saying without words, things that felt too big to say aloud. "Then why do you still show up?" she asked, her voice barely more than a breath. The question hung in the air between us, and for a moment I wasn't sure how to answer. I wanted to say 1,000 things. I wanted to tell her I had shown up for the barn, for the work, for the feeling of purpose I hadn't had in years. But when I looked at her, all I could think was that maybe I had shown up for her. Maybe that's what I had been waiting for all along. "Because some things are worth showing up for," I said, my voice firm, my hand reaching for hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let me take her hand, fingers threading through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. She closed her eyes for a moment, and I could feel the shift in the air. It wasn't just the storm outside. Something was shifting between us, something deep, something real. "You're not afraid of me, are you?" I asked, my voice gentle. She opened her eyes slowly, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "No," she whispered. "I'm afraid of what might happen if I let myself feel this." I could feel the walls she had built around herself, the same ones she had spent years fortifying, but for the first time they were beginning to crack, and I wanted to be the one to catch her when they did. "I won't make you do anything you're not ready for," I said softly, my thumb brushing over the back of her hand. "But I'm not going anywhere, Carmen." She didn't answer, but I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of trust, a flicker of hope, and that was enough for me. It was enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, I had found something worth waiting for. Later that night, when the storm had finally eased and the wind had died down to a soft whisper, Carmen and I sat in the quiet of the barn, the only sound, the soft crackle of the lantern. The air was damp, cool, and the light from the lantern reflected off the freshly repaired beams, casting a soft glow around us. "Why do you think people build things?" she asked, her voice barely above a murmur. I wasn't sure where she was going with it, but I answered anyway, unsure of what she needed to hear. "To create something that lasts, something they can be proud of." Quote, she nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the quilt. "And what happens when it doesn't last?" she asked quietly, her gaze distant. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. She already knew the answer. She had lived it. And I didn't have to tell her what I knew, because we were both carrying the weight of something lost, something that had slipped through our fingers without us realizing it until it was too late. She shifted beside me, leaning in just enough for our shoulders to touch. It was subtle, but it made my heart race. "I've been afraid to build anything new," she said softly. "Afraid that it'll fall apart again. I could feel her vulnerability in the words, like she was letting me into a part of her she had kept hidden for too long. And in that moment, I understood. Building something new takes time, I said, my voice steady. But sometimes you need someone to help hold the walls up while you figure it out. She turned her head slowly to look at me, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of hope and fear. "Do you really think that's all it takes?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a deep breath, looking at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "No," I said quietly. "It takes trust. It takes not running when it gets hard." For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, letting the silence settle around us. The barn felt like home now. The beams we had lifted together holding not just the roof, but everything we had been building between us. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting anymore. "I'm not running," she said softly, her voice a whisper against the quiet. "I know," I said, turning my body toward hers, "and I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, a small tentative smile, but it was enough. It was enough to make everything feel right. "I am glad," she whispered, her hand gently squeezing mine. We stayed like that for a long time, just sitting in the quiet, letting the storm outside fade away, letting the light between us grow stronger. The next morning, the world outside the barn was still wet from the storm, but it felt different now. The barn, the place that had once seemed so broken, now felt whole again. And as I looked at Carmen standing beside me, I knew that we were both rebuilding something, one piece at a time. The sun had barely started to rise when I woke the next morning, the soft glow of early light filtering through the cracks in the barn. I was already awake, though, long before my alarm, because for the first time in weeks something felt right. Something felt like it was worth waking up for. I shifted in the quiet, careful not to disturb Carmen. She had fallen asleep beside me on the old quilt, her body curled up in a way that made her seem smaller, more vulnerable, as if the storm we had weathered together had taken something out of her. I could feel the weight of everything she had been carrying for so long in the way her breath came slow and steady in the morning light. I didn't want to disturb her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed in the last few days, in the last few hours. The barn, once so full of broken beams and exposed walls, was now filled with a quiet, soft light, as if it had come to life again. And I couldn't help but wonder if the same could be said for Carmen and me, if we were both coming back to life in a way we hadn't expected. I stood, careful not to wake her, and moved toward the barn door. The cool morning air hit my face, filling my lungs with a fresh, damp scent. The storm had passed, but the remnants of it still clung to everything: the grass, the trees, the barn. The world was quiet now, still, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. I walked outside and leaned against one of the posts, staring out at the horizon. The sky was a mix of pale blue and soft pink, the sun just beginning to stretch its arms over the valley. The barn, the land, everything around me felt different, bigger, more alive. I could hear the distant sound of birds calling to each other, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just passing through. When I heard Carmen stir behind me, I turned, my heart picking up speed. She was standing in the doorway of the barn, her hair falling in messy waves around her face, her eyes still soft from sleep. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching me like she was seeing me for the first time, like she was trying to understand what was shifting between us. "Morning," she said, her voice still rough from sleep, but there was a softness in it now, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Morning," I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stood there, letting the silence settle between us, letting the morning wrap itself around us. It felt natural, comfortable, like we had always been here, in this space, together. "You're up early," she said, her eyes glancing at the sky. "I didn't think you were much of a morning person." I shrugged, stepping toward her. "I'm not. But today feels different." She raised an eyebrow, studying me like she was trying to figure out what I meant. Different how? Quote, I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to put into words the feeling that had settled deep inside me. The feeling that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That everything, all the waiting, all the pain, had led me here, to this barn, to this woman. "I don't know," I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper. "I just feel like I'm not waiting anymore." Her eyes softened at that, and for a moment I saw something vulnerable in her expression. It was the same look I had seen the night before, when she had let me hold her hand, when she had trusted me in a way she hadn't trusted anyone in a long time. And in that moment, I knew we were both waiting for something. We were waiting for each other. She didn't speak, just stepped closer to me, her eyes never leaving mine. The tension between us was thick, like the air before a storm. But this time, it was different. It wasn't fear or uncertainty. It was something more, something steady. "You really think that?" she asked quietly, her voice almost fragile. "You think I'm not something you're waiting for?" Quote. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. My gaze softened, and I reached out, my hand brushing her cheek lightly, just enough to let her know I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere. "No," I said quietly, my thumb brushing over the curve of her jaw. "I'm not waiting anymore. Not for anything. Not when I already have everything I need right here." She didn't pull away. In fact, she stepped closer, until we were standing in front of each other. So close I could feel the heat from her body. And for a long moment, we didn't need words. We just stood there, letting the quiet of the morning surround us. "You're sure about that?" she asked softly, her voice so low I had to strain to hear it. I smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't let myself feel in years. "I'm sure." And then, before I could stop myself, I leaned in, pressing my lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, hesitant, but quickly deepened into something more. Something that felt like it had been building for a long time. Something that finally felt right. When we pulled away, both of us breathless, I looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, any hesitation. But there was none. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice so soft, so vulnerable. "Not just today. Stay with me, Jude, please." I didn't need to think about it. I didn't need to hesitate. I nodded, pulling her closer, feeling the weight of her trust in the way she held me. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. I wasn't waiting anymore. I had already found what I had been searching for. The days that followed were different, quieter in a way that felt new, even though we were still working hard every day. Carmen and I spent our mornings fixing up the barn, and in the evenings we would find ourselves lingering in the space we had created together, the atmosphere between us full of something deeper than just work. It was like we were both letting down walls, letting something real grow where there had once only been uncertainty. We were starting to feel comfortable with each other, something I hadn't expected. I had never been the type of man to let someone in so easily, but Carmen was different. There was something about her that made me want to stay, something that made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this world anymore. I had always been good at keeping people at arm's length, good at hiding my feelings behind a wall of work, but with Carmen, it felt like that wall was starting to crumble. And it terrified me. One evening, after we had spent the day reinforcing the barn's roof, we sat together, backs against the wall, the silence comfortable, even though it wasn't the kind of silence I was used to. It wasn't the kind of silence that made me feel isolated. It was a silence that felt like we were simply being, like we didn't have to fill the space with words to know what the other person was feeling. Carmen had been quieter than usual that day, and I could tell something was on her mind. She had that far-off look in her eyes, the one she got when she was deep in thought, her brow furrowed, her lips pressed together in a way that made me want to ask her what was wrong. But I didn't. I didn't want to push her, not yet. Instead, I just sat next to her, letting the soft hum of the crickets outside fill the air. The sky was turning purple, the stars beginning to show themselves, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. She shifted next to me, pulling her knees up to her chest, her arms wrapped around her legs. "Jude," she started, her voice so soft I had to lean in to hear her. "Yeah?" I asked, My gaze locked on her, heart suddenly racing. She hesitated, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of her jeans. Do you ever think about what happens when it's all over? The barn, I mean. When it's fixed, and there's nothing left to do? I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about her words. It was the first time she had brought up the end of the project, and I could feel the weight of it, even though the work was far from done. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think about it. A lot, actually. She glanced at me, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite read. What happens after? Quote, I thought about that, about how we were both here, in this place, together, but neither of us had really thought about what came next. Neither of us had thought about the future beyond the barn. Beyond this moment. I guess I never thought about what comes after, I said, my voice quiet. I've been too focused on the here and now, on fixing things, on making sure this place stays standing. She smiled slightly at that, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I've been like that too, always thinking about what I can fix, what I can hold together. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough. If I'm enough. That hit me harder than I expected. Carmen had spent so long fighting to keep things together, and now that she had someone who was willing to stay to help her, she was still doubting herself. I leaned closer to her, gently touching her arm. Carmen, you're more than enough. This barn, everything we've done here, it's more than just fixing walls. It's about what we've built together, and what we're still building. Quote. She looked at me then, really looked at me, her gaze soft and full of something I hadn't seen before. Maybe hope, maybe trust, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she placed her hand over mine, letting the moment hang between us. Neither of us needed words to say what was already understood. We had both been waiting for something, waiting for someone to show us that we didn't have to do it alone. The next morning, when we woke up, the air felt different. There was a sense of peace between us, like we had finally found something that was worth holding on to. The barn was almost done, but somehow it felt like our work was far from over. Not just with the barn, but with everything else. Carmen and I had come so far already, but there was something else I needed to do. Something I hadn't yet said, something that had been sitting heavy on my chest for days. By the time we finished for the day, the barn stood tall and strong, the beams we had worked on together now secure, the foundation solid. The storm had passed, and the place was starting to feel like it had a future, like it had purpose again. Carmen was standing by the door, watching the sunset as it painted the sky with deep oranges and pinks. She had her back to me, but I could see her shoulders relax, like she was finally able to breathe. I walked over to her, my heart pounding as I stepped closer. Carmen, I said, my voice low, hesitant. She turned to me, her expression curious. Yeah? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I meant what I said the other day. I'm not waiting anymore. I don't want to wait for something that feels right when what I need is already here. Right in front of me. Her eyes softened, and she took a step closer to me, her hand reaching for mine. I feel the same way, she whispered, her voice full of something that felt like relief. Without thinking, I pulled her toward me, our lips meeting in a kiss that was different than any kiss I had ever shared. It wasn't just about desire, though that was there too. It was about something deeper, something real. When we pulled apart, I didn't need to say anything. Her smile said it all. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd found everything I needed. Not in the barn, not in the work, but in the woman standing beside me, offering me something I had been waiting for my whole life. The days after that kiss felt like they had come straight out of a dream. The barn was finished. The work was done. But the connection between Carmen and me was just beginning, and it felt like something real, something that had been growing slowly in the cracks and crevices of everything we had built together. We spent the next few days finishing the final touches, cleaning up the last of the debris, and getting ready for the grand reveal. People were already starting to talk about the barn, about the transformation that had happened, but Carmen and I both knew it wasn't just the barn that had changed. It was us. The place that had once seemed like a burden, a broken structure that no one thought could stand again, now felt alive with possibility. And so did I. I had never been someone who believed in fate or destiny, but With Carmen, everything had fallen into place so perfectly that it was hard not to think there was something bigger at work. We had both been lost in our own ways, her fighting to hold everything together, me hiding from anything that threatened to disrupt my carefully built walls. But somehow, we had found each other in the midst of it all. We were standing together in the barn one afternoon, looking over the work we had done. It was nearly sunset, and the light coming through the windows cast a warm glow over everything. The barn, the beams we had lifted, the walls we had reinforced, they all seemed to breathe with new life, as if they were finally ready to serve their purpose again. "This place," Carmen said quietly, her voice full of awe, "it feels like it's been waiting for this, waiting for us to finish it." I looked over at her, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, the setting sun making her look like something out of a dream. She was beautiful, stronger than she knew, and there was a light in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Yeah," I agreed, stepping closer to her. "It feels like it's finally alive." She turned to me then, her eyes searching mine, and I knew she was asking something without saying it, something I had been feeling too. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." Her smile was small but full of warmth, a smile that said everything we hadn't said aloud. The weight of everything we had been through, the walls we had torn down together, the trust we had built. It was all in that moment, in the quiet between us. "I'm not scared anymore," she said, her voice soft but full of resolve. I nodded, reaching for her hand, pulling her gently toward me. "Good, because we're in this together. And I don't want to wait anymore either." She didn't need to say anything else. Instead, she leaned in, pressing her lips to mine in a kiss that was everything I had been waiting for. It was slow, sweet, and full of the promise of something new, something real. When we pulled away, I rested my forehead against hers, the air between us charged with a quiet kind of tension, the kind that came from knowing you had found something you didn't want to let go of. "I've never been good at staying," she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then I'll be here to remind you how it feels, how good it is to stay." She laughed softly, her hand sliding into mine. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I've been running from the wrong things." I squeezed her hand, pulling her toward the door of the barn, where the light from the sunset bathed everything in golden warmth. "Maybe," I said, "you were just waiting for someone to show you it was worth staying for." She didn't say anything else, just nodded, letting me lead her outside, into the fading light of the day. As we stepped outside, I realized that the barn wasn't the only thing that had been transformed. We had both changed, we had both rebuilt something we hadn't known was broken. And now, standing together in the quiet, in the soft glow of the setting sun, I knew that, whatever came next, we would face it together. The barn behind us stood strong, a symbol of everything we had fought for, everything we had built. But it was more than just the barn that had been rebuilt. It was us, our lives, our hearts, our future. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I had everything I needed, right here, right now. "Stay with me," Carmen whispered, her hand squeezing mine, her eyes filled with something that was more than hope. It was certainty. "I'm already here," I said, my voice low, filled with the truth of everything we had built together. "And I'm not going anywhere." As we walked into the sunset together, the world around us seemed to breathe again, the barn behind us, standing as a reminder of the work we had done and the love we had found. This was only the beginning.